I appreciate it. Welcome everyone to day 2 of the Docker track. I'd like to welcome up Jeff Murr from MetLife and Brian Walker from our own Docker, and they're gonna present on modernizing traditional apps.
We've got to get our little clickers and such ready. So thanks everybody, come on in. We're gonna go ahead and get the selfie out of the way at the very beginning before everybody leaves with the money slides and stuff. So let's see here. All right. We can't get everybody in. 1, 2, 3, selfie. Good deal. Thanks. So I think we got an error box here. Let me, I can do Mac. There we go. Welcome everybody. This will be a track, this will be a session on modernizing traditional applications and what we've done at MetLife. So I'm gonna go through a lot of content specific to MetLife and kind of our journey. How many people here are enterprise architects? Okay. How many people here are like SE engineer, that world? All right. And I assume the rest of you are all just really cool developers? All right. So this will probably gravitate towards a real enterprise architect, an SE type flow. Developers will get a whole lot out of this, I think, especially give some tools of how to communicate back with those other roles. Once I'm done, Brian's going to come back up and talk about some enhancements I think that Docker's wanting to just kind of talk about from the lessons learned working with MetLife. So I'll jump in and then we'll come back to some of the stuff from Docker, okay? So specifically, here's the agenda we're going to go down here. I'm going to give some background. You probably, maybe not, maybe you haven't heard a whole lot about MetLife's strategy and what we've been doing with Docker. So I'll get a quick overview of that real quick. Talk about our modernization strategy, where we want to go, why we want to go there specifically, and hopefully get some feedback from you guys either in the Q&A or after this about what you guys think of it. Talk about our container strategy, how it is nuancely different than our modernization strategy and why there are 2 separate strategies and why we think that's important. Talk about where we are now, what we see, so we can kind of discuss about the next thing is what is wrong. We've identified we're just not getting some of the adoption we want. We know why, so what we're going to do about it. And then Brian will come back up and kind of give us a little bit of what Docker's services are. So modernizing traditional apps. I'm Jeff Murr. I lead the open source strategy under engineering at MetLife. I also manage the container strategy within engineering, and we're starting to target more of cloud native services and PaaS offerings and services. So I'm fairly active, so look me up if anybody has any questions or wants to follow up or anything. So I'll jump right into MetLife. MetLife, we sell life insurance. We also sell a lot of other products globally. We've made some business moves recently to increase our footprint around the globe. So with that comes a lot of things to consider when we have efficiencies that we need to do to promote these products. So big company, Fortune 43, lots of employees, a lot of applications, 100 million customers. That means that translates to about 50 countries. Lots of money and investments, 66 billion in revenue. So it's really massive, this application portfolio to support all of this. So these are, we're also going through a digital transformation. Who's not, am I right? So we're looking at ways to maximize data, big data, AI, commoditizing those, delivering models around the globe in a normalized way. So there's lots of work to do. And to deliver this digital strategy, we got to rationalize some of the old legacy stuff. Rationalize is probably the key word, figure out what we do with it. So I guess in Copenhagen, we talked at DockerCon EU about a business case, and that business case was MTA at that time. And MTA, modernized traditional applications. We went through that process, and at that point, it was just a business case. it was a very valuable business case. It acknowledged the fact that there's opportunity here. With that opportunity, we were expected it would just take off and run, but we found that there's still some care and feeding that we need to do there. So, but there's really kind of 4 things that we want to make sure we understand at the next couple of slides is why containerization matters to MetLife, not just the cost. We've got to double click past that. What it started and where is it going. We have to make sure that we understand what this can do, but what it can't do. There's still other things to consider inside of that. Who this impacts, and we'll talk a little more about that as you saw on the agenda, what we did wrong, and a high-level idea of what our factory looks like. I really want to make sure you understand that even though I say it's wrong, it's probably just because I was really expecting perfection, but it won't happen that way. So let's be really honest about what is the care and feeding and maintenance that has to happen after the fact. So to give kind of a concept here, in 1975, Forrester came back out and said by the year 2000, every company will be paperless. Only 18% today, as of last year when they started doing the research, are actually paperless. I don't know what lines of business you're all in, but I'm in insurance, and I know my business units still require faxes. So 82% of companies are not digital. This isn't about being digital as far as paper goes, but there's an obvious choice here, and companies aren't making the leap. There's an obvious choice to go digital. It's smarter, it's faster, it's cheaper. You can commoditize that data. You can secure that data, retention on that data. You can quality control that data, but people aren't making the leap. That represents kind of the same paradigm we are right now. We have containers, but we're not jumping, we're not going. How do we make sure that that leap feels right? It's an operating model leap. It's a mindset leap. It's a cultural leap. It's a transformation leap. So even so much that the paper companies have really said we should have burnt this down a long time ago. We should have got out of this. So that's my Dunder Mifflin pitch. That's the dad joke. But so it kind of translates. You know, there's something obviously better here. Why aren't people just making the leap? We have this great business case. We have this now platform. We're just not getting the floods. We're getting the trickle. And it's not about flexibility because it's definitely in there, but it's just not awareness, or people feel like it's not. It's anti to their current operating model. So we have to change that. So at MetLife, we are very focused on a modernization track that targets what we coin or talk about as currency. Currency is keeping things current. Latest patch levels, latest frameworks, latest, you name it. How do we insert that into code quicker? How do we get rid of old infrastructure faster? How do we upgrade from this OS to that OS? How do we avoid continuing service contracts? How do we maintain security because we're on the latest patch thing? We refer all that as we bundle it into a term called currency. So if we go from these deployment models where we have applications that are natively installed on servers or natively installed on VMs inside of IaaS, and we trend towards, in the green area, we really want to go to managed services, cloud native, Azure's application service runtime, or the equivalent in AWS or Google. Those represent instantly current. They'll patch that for us. We won't have that legacy sprawl kind of around. And then if we can get all of our applications into containers, we can still manage that dependency tree that an application may need or require, but in a managed way. So what we want to do is trend right with our hosting while we trend left with process and policy. So by shifting left, a lot of people probably refer to that as the SDLC. Right, so then we say, let's give the power back to the developer to maintain the application currency while we can run at the speed of whatever we need to in the infrastructure side. So we want to trend right here, and that is managed currency. There is a lot of effort that went behind this, and I got to throw this out. It's the MetLife logo, too. Kind of cool. So I was really excited about that. But we want to get away from having a lot of different server configurations to a very minimal number of server configurations, if any at all. So the opportunity here, my boss's boss, Tim Yule, has asked that we do 4 S's plus C. by CTO Eric Lotta came up with the 4S's as our kind of driving behind the global technology, but we have to make sure that C is a thing that we recognize. So has anybody, you probably heard of the 4S's: speed, stability, scalability, security, and cost. So these are kind of our guiding principles. Speed, if we decouple applications from the infrastructure, they can both run independently as far as keeping things current. That's a win. So that speed is important. Developers are able to deploy more often. Usually when you have problems, it's not because you don't change, it's because you don't change enough. So you really you want to ramp up the level of change you can throw at an environment, not take it down. We have large change freezes. Anyone else have large change? Yeah, that's not really it's an anti-pattern to getting things fixed. So we want to try to help that with speed. Stability, we want things resilient, high available. Scalability, something we can replicate and create and respond to the Super Bowl ad problem. Once a year, everyone rushes to go and renew their life insurance policy. How do we scale to meet that and then scale down to have cost innovation associated with it? Security, if we can deploy faster, we can remediate fixes faster. Another key piece is understanding the security ops role. I don't think everyone in our security ops teams, they're getting there now, but at first, I don't understand this. It's different than code, but they didn't realize that all the metadata is available to us to do really good CVE checks. Struts was a really good thing for us to learn how that information's in this metadata. Overall, those struts was a really bad thing. We can all agree on that. But the idea is that information is available to a security ops team now. And it's available to us to respond quickly to problems and events in a new way. Cost. So all this bundles up to the fact that maintaining currency, maintaining applications, doing this to scale becomes cheaper because it's faster. We tend to have these massive projects once a year to get rid of this old legacy OS. And they're usually coined really cool ways of saying this is like an innovation project, when we all kind of know it's because it's Windows 2000, we got to shut down, right? So yeah, we're all gonna just run after this innovation project. But really what it is we've got to uptick 500-600 applications off of something that's dying. So we can do that every day. It represents the fact that we can avoid having these large projects. It's part of our BAU now. So modernization strategy, container strategy. To do this to scale, we've had to kind of create the three driving light pillars here. One is embrace containers as ubiquitous. We should understand how to host everything in containers, and it doesn't mean that everything should work in the same model. We may have to change that model when it's different, when it's authentication versus application logic versus data. Kubernetes versus Swarm, where to apply it, how to do that, what's the best practice for storage. So understand those nuances. We have to enrich ourselves as the engineer side and create usable models that people can consume very quickly on the development side. Support containers across the application portfolio. I'm going to get really into this about when we say the word app, I think we oversimplify what we're actually trying to say is and enterprise architects are probably nodding in the sense that when you say app, you actually mean all the components of an application, the data, the cache, the authorization layer, the system of record. When you say containerized, what do you mean? I'll show you what I specifically mean and what we're targeting. And that includes Java, .NET, all of that. Understand how to best create base images models. And so we want to democratize it too. We have open sourced our CAS internally to MetLife. How many, show of hands, how many people have heard of the term inner source? Okay, real quick. It's inner source versus open source. So inside the four walls of MetLife, we have an open source mentality. So we put it into our bit bucket and we create it as open. We show all of our infrastructure as code, configurations, base Docker files, base applications, all of that. Now that Docker has this application template, maybe we can revisit that. But that was a way for us to try to fix the problem of developers feeling like this was abnormal or alien. But that also opened up the fact that now anyone can go into these repos and do a pull request. We have a global mindset. So we have people in Australia, Japan, Malaysia. They're wanting to do containers too. I can't stay on the phone, or my team can't stay on the phone all day explaining how to do containers. We need to give this back to them, and if they see a problem, let them fix it. And if they need features enhancements, we treat it like an open source project. So now, really quick, let's get some bearings before I go into our application portfolio stuff. But what is an app? Let's be honest. It's not just like your phone, like it's not just the Mint app or the Amazon app. There's a lot behind an app. And I kind of break it down to the 4 or 5 key places. One we're really not going to touch much. But so we want to make sure that we understand the separation of network zones. We've got external, we got application zone, internal zone, but we have authentication, business, data, transactional support, and system of record. System of record, we're not touching that with containers yet, but the other ones I really want to kind of talk about. What I'm talking about here in this talk is really what's in the dotted line. It's just the application zone. But that doesn't mean that obviously data like SQL, data like Oracle, it could be containerized. It's just not first and foremost on our priority list. So in priority, we go this route. One is what we have today. And when I say business logic, that's our Spring, that's our WAS or middleware. Transactional supports like your RabbitMQ, your Cache, your Redis, that layer of stuff. And then data. Data will come second. It'll probably come in the part of this year. So modernization and for MetLife really kind of means 2 things, and it's broken out. We've focused this on a Gartner scale. So Gartner has a time model, and time here is tolerate, invest, migrate, and eliminate. And for us, the first app we did was our digital strategy app, and that is Global Sales and Servicing Platform. I'm going to talk a lot about that, primarily because it represents the ability for us to scale something that's high business value, which you see business value across the bottom, and then we see technical effectiveness across the side. So something that's very critical to the business and is also a very green field would be in the invest quadrant. That's where you would put a whole lot of your investment around new things. You would migrate things that are high business value, and by migrating, what we mean is the capabilities, the business capabilities, and push them into that invest quadrant. The hope there is that you can start sunsetting applications that have that high level of business criticality and value, but are not the latest, greatest apps. It helps you reduce that portfolio and start synergizing around a certain common platform. And it's working. Then what's left? The tolerate and eliminate. These are your Windows 2003, your RHEL 5, your things that you want to get off of the legacy WAS infrastructure, that kind of stuff. All of those are models that you want to try to put into the container platform. That's what we want to do. Give that back to the developer so they can deploy out to a centralized CAS and make it feel like the invest quadrant as much as possible without having to decompose the application and rewrite the authentication tier, or rewrite the business logic, or rewrite the caching structure or the data if we don't touch it. So, making sense so far? Haven't lost anybody yet? All right, good. So the GSSP, Global Sales and Services, really quick crash course on it, is our digital channel. The digital channel is managed by our digital officer, Greg Baxter, and Alain Genovese and his group under Carlos, and these all people these are like name dropping stuff. But at the end of the day, those are very important people, and they're driving the digital strategy close with our business units. And why that's important is that it represents that invest quadrant for us. It's distributed across the globe into our 3 key regions. We've got the US, in Turkey, there's one in EMEA. We have 2 in APAC, 1 in Japan and 1 in Australia. Primarily drivers behind that are data sovereignty. We have to make sure that data is there. These plug into the systems of record in this region. So again, we don't touch the systems of record. But it's distributed, the same containers are built in the US, pushed into DTR, and then distributed across the globe so that they're the same here as they are there. Currently, our footprint is 550-ish services, large amount of containers in the US. This in EMEA, we 70 and 340-ish, 240, and then 660 in the containers as far as the APAC go. To do this in legacy infrastructure, to do this in legacy VMs would be extremely challenging, and so far we've done this over the course of the past year or so. Going back to what this recommends, if we put this back over to those 4 S's and the C, and the kind of highlights are, we've got 70% reduction in infrastructure compared to standalone servers, and efficiencies are there as well. But we're also now rationalizing 20 apps. By the end of the year, we're going to sunset applications that we have migrated that business capability into the microservices GSSP application, which is that modern containerized. So that's modernization there without actually doing a lift and shift. In the EMEA, we're still very small. It's just, and right now it's in Turkey because it meant a compliance regulatory need. But ultimately, it was cheaper, 60% cheaper than the infrastructure if we were doing it standalone just in that region. The same thing for the Japan and Australia. It was much cheaper to do it in a containerized ecosystem for all of the S's plus the C. This translates to, globally, we're looking at 7% avoidance, and with these 20 apps being sunset, we start rolling that out. This translates back over to, this is annual avoidance and save of that $1 million-ish amount. And these are real money. So we have to continue that. But it's not good enough to say that. We have to start empowering developers and getting the operating model tuned and aligned in knowledge. So that's what I want to get into now. Our CAS, straightforward enough, but this slide goes a long way whenever talking to operating committee folks, people that are our leaders. What build, ship, and run defines as a developer role versus an operator role versus your engineer. Not every company is going and rebranding themselves as a DevOps organization. They're thinking of it as a concept, and they're thinking of it as a mindset they want to proliferate. So to do it, I want to make sure I can talk to those people because MetLife is in that boat. And what we say here is that engineering is engineering operations into the development lifecycle through this model. It allows us to start thinking about applications as configurations, as YAML files, as Docker files, sharing that information, putting infrastructure configuration right next to application configuration because it's a containerized platform. And we have 3 basic offerings, and that is the microservices world, your traditional world, and then we're starting to get third parties, and we can do third party like labs and POCs with people that want to just give us a Docker file. We throw that to a lab. I don't need to go buy servers for that. We can POC that pretty quickly. So it was recently Black Duck. We brought them in to do a POC, and we were up and running in a day. Where before I'd have to go buy servers. Even in Azure, that takes time. So third-party people are starting to look at this as an opportunity to give something really quickly. And so inside of this microservices world, we have offerings. We have offerings as far as the base images that everyone wants to consume, which is great. But again, there's a learning curve that has to happen, and how do we deliver that? And that's the most important thing for us right now is there is a mindset that has to shift left towards the development. But there is absolutely stuff we have to give to the operators. There's stuff that we have to go to the shift right. And for us, the developers now they have to know about networking. They need to know about how to package a container, what an image is. We as a container community may have not hit the nail on the head explaining what container means. We kind of just took the shipping analogy and assumed everybody was getting it. But in images, it takes a little nuancey thing to kind of figure out if you're explaining it to someone brand new. That's a really good example of the fact that you have to understand how to manage their code now in containers, how to develop like container native. Put it into a container, put your test case in a container, test it on your box as a container. Otherwise, you're going to have parity between dev and prod. That's information you're going to have to know. And these are things we have to focus on to make sure we do for the development community. Focus applications being current. Now they can focus on converting those applications whenever a new layer needs to be updated. We're going from Liberty 10 to 15 or 18 to 17 or whatever the latest version is. Application dev, modify the config and redeploy. I don't need to go buy servers anymore. I don't have to go buy storage to support those servers anymore. It's a matter of, that's handled over here on the right side. So I'll go to the right side. Orchestration knowledge. I can give you a specific example, P2 incident, recently in the past couple of weeks where a microservice was on a node went down. It's in legacy compose, not in swarm. And it was this little pesky attribute, relocate on failure. And so when the node went down, the service redeployed. The modified timestamp on that service was updated to that date. Operations freaked out, and rightfully so. They thought someone had circumvented change process and it was deploying, and that was the reason the host went down, and it went crazy. Once we got in there and started explaining to them that no, it's supposed to redeploy. It's called orchestration. That's actually a really good thing. It mitigated that problem. It represented we have a gap. We need to fill some gaps there. Source control knowledge. If we're going to do this inner source infrastructure as code, we need to explain to legacy SAs, system administrators, what a pull request is, what a feature branch is, how to merge. Developers get a lot of this part of their day job, but if we're going to start doing this as inner sourcing model and we're going to start doing it for structure as code with Docker and all of this great stuff, that represents what has to shift right. We've got to mayonnaise that across both sides. And now tell the operators, patch at will, do at will, fix the infrastructure, the applications are resilient, orchestration will happen, HA isn't baked in, but all that's got to be comfort. We can't just throw that at somebody and not give them some real good knowledge behind it. So with that, we're responding with an internal training program. First is they're going to be ran by we're lucky we have a captain on staff. First is Containers 101, and this is the same captain content, the lab content, but we're going to make this required in learning management. So learning management is something we go through this course to onboard into the CAS, do 101, make sure you understand the core principles of it, then graduate to 102, and that's MetLife's version. So we'll create content specifically for the MetLife CAS and be able to train them on what is abstracted away from you because of governance, but you can still do this locally. How does this reconcile with your day job? Then finally is let's get this thing started. Let's onboard. Let's go. Let's do it. So remember the success metrics. This is important because you need to measure those. If we're going to do the learning, we're going to do the onboarding, and we're going to do all of this training, what does it really mean at the end? So let's measure this. So far we're measuring it, and it's coming pretty good. With the applications that are starting to trickle in, we're seeing an 80% increase in speed. So they're able to do 80% more deploys, 80% more projects. Stability, fewer incident tickets. The global sales and servicing platform, since being converted from its legacy and being put into here, they're running more efficient. They're staying up. Scalability, we can order containers through YAML deploy faster than we will ever be able to put a server request into our CMDB and get it put on with an IP address and everything else. Anyone with a large company knows getting a server, it's challenging sometimes. It doesn't matter how great your automation is. Security, we're able to go and remediate something in a week, 2-week cycle versus a 3-4 month change approval process. Cost, again, we're seeing 70% reduction because of the density and the co-location, distribution, the operating model efficiencies inside of that. That translates to millions in our bottom line. It's not teeny tiny numbers when we start doing it to scale. Even for the GSSP and those 20 applications, that's real money that we're able to claim back as efficiencies. I'm going to give you this factory view real quick. We define this factory view, assess and identify, discover the applications, figure out the dependencies, get the network stuff. That takes about 2 weeks. Remediate on board. Anything needs to be remediated. It takes about 2 or 3 weeks. We haven't really seen much more than that. But we budget 4. Deploy and measure. The measure is key. Identify the KPIs, then measure the KPIs. It's really the same information that you're providing most likely to any type of chargeback. It's just a matter of doing a quality check before you just throw it out the door. But capture that so you can make sure they're getting what they want out of the container, and they understand the value so that could be a good champion on the dev side, because that information has to proliferate to that community. Go live and then sunset, track the sunset. Otherwise they're just gonna duplicity on that. It may be more of a problem for us at MetLife, but some people don't realize to shut servers off to save money. It's just a checkbox to make sure. Put all of this into a development project plan. We're seeing that it takes about 3 months. By that, it will probably get better. These are rough magnitude estimates over the 20 so apps that we have now. But another project for us would usually take between 13 and 15 months. So it is much quicker. It's much more of a quantified list and checklist of what to get done. So to wrap all this up, 3 key points: define and measure strategy and success. Teach, tool, evangelize, and do. Measure success as part of your implementation. Don't assume it. The business case is not just that's when it's done. That might get you the first round of funding, but it won't bring it home. It's a really cheesy quote to say, don't think that you can build it and they will come. But it is really, you want to follow that up with a whole lot of transformation, a whole lot of knowledge transfer, and evangelize that.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for a nice presentation here this morning. I have a question which is a little outside of the realm of the actual technical implementation. Considering that you are a large company, you have a large legacy estate and a service management process which is perhaps not aligned to the new ways of working. How did you go about that? So for example, earlier if you had to undertake a change to a firewall port, it will go through a sequence of CAP processes and so on and so forth. And now is a time where you perhaps have a catalog into which you press a button and most of it gets deployed. It undergoes all the change requests as necessary, so on and so forth. So how is it that you went about changing the mindset, culture, and processes in your organization in a few minutes, if you can give some highlights?
Sure. So the inner source thing is really powerful. So managing this, just like code, really brought it to the developer in a really big way. So all the standard operating procedures of first you get this, once you get this, you put code here. Once you put code here, these requests must be given. And right now we're working with our network team to make it policy driven so that when an application comes on, for instance, their firewall is loaded into an access group policy as opposed to a host policy, but that's really detailed. The idea though is put all of that into a boilerplate repository they can pull down and start getting them thinking about, to do this quickly, model yourself after this repo and push that in. And from there, it will be a standard offering. And that standard offering, we gut check along the way in the sense that in our build quadrant, right? So we go from commit to build to deploy. Inside of our build, we're Atlassian, so it's bamboo. We lint out anything that could be problematic, right? And the reason we do that, and we'll clearly outline that inside of a README file. So we really treat it just like if you're going to go to GitHub and kick up a new project with something, we want it to feel that same way here, so that if we miss something, pull request. That's a great idea. Could you just commit that as a pull request, and let's collectively learn from that. And for that, we're starting to staff differently as a response. Like the engineer of the future, we want to start being mindful of the fact that we want them to put their stuff in code as opposed to the certification exams of the old were very GUI driven. We want concepts, we want that kind of stuff. So we'll see how that goes, but that's how we did it. Yeah.
So you talked about the challenges that you faced with making sure everybody was able to learn and people had to gain the understanding of both sides of the equation. Did you have any issues with perhaps say like development teams or maybe even operation teams that were kicking and screaming against that? And how did you overcome those human limitations where people just were anti, taking ownership or perhaps getting that responsibility of having to be a part of that process?
Maybe I'm too much of an optimistic. I don't think it was so much kicking and screaming. It was, I don't understand this. There definitely were, and still are, folks that I don't understand what my role is in that world. So for that, I can't promote it. And I think once we get better at articulating those roles, for instance, accountability over specific technology at large companies they're usually tracked back over to a single person, not a ton of developers. So just pick one, right? Any technology, .NET. There's probably someone on the infrastructure side that wants to make sure that .NET is patched and ready to go. We, as the container open source, have to build that .NET and give it back to that person. and give them now a container option to provide, and give them the four S's and the C to say, here's why you want to offer this versus that, and architect group, let's make this a first-class citizen and create a coin sorter so new applications that would come in go to the container route versus this, because it's a strategic direction, and start using that as the way to get alignment. So it's not really replacing, it's upshifting, it's truly upshifting that skill set to say, here's the modern version of your world post legacy, VM installation stuff. So that's what I mean. That's that give and take culture change of that. It's really about, I don't think anybody's unwilling to go this route. It's the same way with the paper stuff. It's not that I'm unwilling, it's just my job's to check the facts. So, yeah. Yep. Thanks.
So you talked about containerization, and that's I guess that's a known problem with the solution. But isn't it the underlying issue is how do you break up a traditional legacy app into a modular? You basically have to re-architect it. And could you tell us a little bit about how did you overcome that challenge, the re-architecting of apps so that they can actually be containerized?
Yeah. That comes up a lot, and last night it was the reason that I created that slide where I talked about the different application components. Because when we say app, we kind of oversimplify the fact that, well, we don't want to containerize the data yet, or not the data, but it's so that kind of conversation. And where they live today, .NET is a really good example of that. Right? So .NET has a lot of stuff, they'll have it all on one server, and you've got to decouple it, as well as the components within it, the authorization may be plugged inside of as a filter it's talking to an agent on the box, that agent can't be containerized for whatever reason. So for that, it's really just that business logic layer. Start there. You'll get that save, but for instance, if you're Ping, or if you're SiteMinder, or if you're something in that authorization tier that's running in that server that you can't containerize, for that we've acknowledged it, and we have this reverse proxy tier that we route those types of applications through. So it's about addressing a pattern that would be able to get some level of save out of one component containerization and start marching people down to a CAS type of way. But yes, I totally get, and that's why we're all here at this conference, right, is understanding where the line is. I mean, obviously it's not COTS unless the vendor's going to provide it, but in the same regard, it is probably about starting with the components of the application portfolio at that macro level that make the most sense to do first. And for that reason, business logic, transactional support, we get that, and the rest of the stuff will just kind of come. And the other part is, as you go around the globe, that authorization and data, especially now with the regulations come down, that represents more in-region operating model that's just barrier to entry or headwind on that. Did that help? Did that make sense? Yeah, little bit, and then, it's not all in. It can't be everything. Yeah. We got some really...
Hi.
Yeah.
I have a traditional application which is running on the .NET platform with SQL Server as a backend. And what do you suggest? I have two options to do an MTA, modernizing my traditional application by containerizing or Dockerizing my web server part and plugging into a SQL Server backend, which I can use a Docker image, SQL Server running under Linux, or I can also use the PaaS services of Azure provided for backend service. Which one you prefer? Why?
I can answer it, and then maybe you can answer it. Where is your data now?
Currently, the live data is on-prem.
It's on-prem.
Yeah.
So take that into account. You're going to have to move that to the cloud.
Yep.
And you wouldn't want to probably put app in cloud and data on-prem. You'd want to figure out how to get it all in, right?
Yeah.
And for MetLife, we have a different view as far as questions of what type of data, and then look at the constraints. Personally, I would love to go just fully managed service. And I wish I could give this to
exactly.
else.
That's where I'm stuck. Like, should I use the managed services, such as PaaS services from Azure, because they manage everything with respect to SQL Server?
Here's the thing to keep in mind with that. And as a leader, I have to kind of figure this out. And you probably have the same question: is how willing are we to maintain that SQL instance How willing are we to say that, yeah, patch that thing. You're not going to hurt me. Yeah. Like, so the level of cloud native stack really means that I have less control. How much control do I need to maintain continuity? You know, is this application built around a team that, given a patch that came out last night, they could respond instantly with a new schema that would be compliant with that PaaS that's going to be patched at night? You're not going to go to Microsoft and say, hey, can you hold back on that thing? I got to get this through change management. So I think it's more around the operating model question and where is your data now? How much of a change? And that would be the things to think about. I don't have no silver bullet there, but
yeah.
You know, containers represent a certain structure of dependency I can guarantee, even in a PaaS. If I go native on that, therefore the WAR, the DLL, whatever that is, I've got to be willing to change that at a moment's notice because the PaaS has been shifted up. Okay. So with PaaS services, you gain that currency, but you lose the ability to say, all right, I don't need so much developers because I don't need to respond to anything. So there's a balancing act in there.
Yeah, and I'll say from a Docker perspective, I mean, we're not going to answer it here, but I mean, if we'd love to talk to you about it,
okay.
Let's we can connect afterwards and get your information from a solution architecture standpoint. You know, love to have those conversations with you.
Sure, thank you.
We can, you know, look at a lot of best practices over some very large enterprises to kind of help you with that.
That's always a fun conversation to have.
Yep.
Yeah,
too, right?
exactly.
Yep.
But yeah, it really around your operating model for me. But you guys are really wanting to hang out.
This is great.
Well, appreciate it, Jeff, Brian. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.